Have you ever noticed that some ideas just stick with you? They're like a catchy tune that gets stuck in your head, replaying over and over. Well, that's the power of a well-crafted story or analogy. Imagine you've ordered a sofa from your favourite furniture store and they have told you that it's going to be delivered Friday afternoon between 12 and 5. So you take the afternoon off work and you wait in, and 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 comes and goes, and no sofa's arrived. So you phone up your store and you say, "Where on earth is my sofa?" You're rather angry and frustrated. And they turn around to you and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, we were too busy." Well, how would you react to that? But it's interesting that when we miss deadlines at work, when our team members miss deadlines and their excuse is, "Oh, I'm too busy," we almost sympathize with them and say, "Oh, don't worry about it." Yet, of course, with the furniture analogy or story I just shared with you, there's no way we would say, "Oh, you poor thing." We would either demand a refund, we'd want compensation, we would want the sofa delivered, or we would agree a different delivery date. But we certainly wouldn't say, "Oh, well, never mind." And when you tell that story to somebody who constantly misses deadlines, the light bulb goes on. And that's the power of using analogies or stories in our work context. And I'm a big storyteller, so I thought I would record an episode on storytelling and analogies. So in this episode, I'll unpack the importance of storytelling and analogies and why it resonates so deeply with our team members. We'll also discuss the role of analogies in simplifying complex ideas and making abstract concepts more tangible. So I hope by the end of this episode, you'll be inspired and perhaps equipped with the knowledge and tools to elevate your internal and client communications through the art of storytelling and analogies. So let's jump in. I'm Rob DaCosta, and this is the Agency Accelerator podcast. As someone who has stood in your shoes, having started, grown and sold my own agency, I know just how it feels in the ups and downs of agency life. So this podcast aims to ease your journey just a little by sharing mine and my guests' experiences and advice as you navigate your way to growing a profitable, sustainable and enjoyable business. We all have different communication styles. Some of us are thinkers. Those are people that really like the detail and they communicate and process information in a linear way. Some of us are knowers. These are really instinctual people that answer questions with one-word answers, and they don't like the detail, so they want to read the executive summary to get the idea of what a report is about. And some of us, including me, are predominantly feelers, and that means that we tell stories rather than describing things in a linear fashion, and we like pictures and diagrams. Stories have been a fundamental part of human communication since the dawn of time. From ancient cave paintings to modern-day blockbuster movies, we're hardwired to respond to narratives. But why is storytelling so powerful? And particularly, why is storytelling and using analogies so powerful in a work context? Well, stories tap into our emotions in a way that dry facts and figures simply can't. They can create a connection, allowing the listener or the reader to empathize and relate to the characters and situations being portrayed. You'll understand that from my introduction where I talked about the furniture story. If I was just telling a member of my team that I was really frustrated that they constantly miss deadlines, then it's fairly unlikely that anything's going to change. Whereas if I can tell them a story that they could relate to because they've probably ordered some furniture or whatever it is before and had to wait and it hasn't arrived, suddenly they're going to understand the point I'm making because I'm telling a story. This emotional resonance makes stories far more memorable and impactful than mere data or statistics or dry facts. In my coaching, it can help clients see that they are stuck in a repeating pattern, or it can make a point rather than simply describing the situation they're in, as per my furniture example. Another good example of this is if I'm dealing with an agency that is consistently over-servicing their clients. Of course, we're going to dig into the reasons why, but over-servicing could well be deeply embedded into their agency. So they just think, well, that's just the way it is. And I always say that 50% of running a successful agency is mindset and 50% is actual implementation. So to help them understand this, I might tell them a story. So I might say to them, imagine that you've gone to your favorite coffee shop. Well, of course, that coffee shop's called DaCosta Coffee. And every morning they buy a coffee in that coffee shop. And let's say they pay £3 for that coffee. But one day they walk in and they say a really lovely croissant sitting there as well. So they buy their coffee, they pay their £3, and then they say to the cashier, oh, I'd also like that croissant as well. And the cashier says, sure, of course, that's an extra £2.50. And you look at the cashier and say, no, I want that free because I've just bought a coffee. And they think you're from Planet Cuckoo Land, basically. But we do that with our clients, don't we? They're buying a coffee from you, but you often deliver the coffee and the croissant. And so by me telling a story, I start to help my clients understand how ludicrous it is that we're always giving away the croissant for free. And that's a lot easier than me just saying, hey guys, you shouldn't be over servicing. And they think, well, intellectually, Rob, I know that, but we just don't know how to stop it. Once they understand the coffee and the croissant story, we can start to dig into some strategies to start changing it. I hope that gives you an example of storytelling and analogies and shows you some of the power of doing that when it's appropriate. Stories also help us process and retain information more effectively. Our brains are wired to recognize patterns and make sense of the world through narratives. By packaging information into a cohesive story, we make it easier for our audience to understand and remember the key points we are trying to convey. From a psychological perspective, stories activate multiple areas of our brains simultaneously. As we listen to or read a story, our brain's neural pathways light up, simulating the experiences being described. This brain activation is what makes stories so vivid and engaging, creating a sense of immersion that fosters deeper understanding and retention, and ultimately, in a coaching perspective, is likely to create change in the client. Now, while storytelling is a powerful communication tool, analogies can be equally effective in helping clients grasp complex ideas or abstract concepts or getting your point across in a different way. But what exactly is an analogy, and why is that different to a story? Well, an analogy is a comparison between two things that are essentially different but share similarities. It's a way of explaining something unfamiliar by relating it to something more familiar or more concrete. For example, if I were to say having a plan for your agency is like planning a road trip, I'm drawing an analogy between the importance of having a vision and a plan for your agency and the adventure of planning a road trip. While these two things are inherently different, they share similarities. Both involve starting with a destination in mind and then working backwards to plan the trip or write the plan. Analogies are effective because they tap into your brain's innate ability to recognize patterns and make connections. When we hear or we read an analogy, our brain instantly starts mapping the similarities between the two things that are being compared, helping us understand the unfamiliar concept in a more tangible, relatable way. I find analogies are really great to remove blockages for clients and to help them understand the point I'm trying to make. In this case, that if you don't have a plan, you're likely to get lost, you're going to go round in circles, or you're going to fail to get to your destination, just like if you don't have a plan for a road trip. In the world of marketing, where we often deal with abstract ideas and intangible concepts, analogies can be invaluable tools for communicating with our clients. They take complex topics and they break them down into more digestible, easy to understand comparisons, bridging the gap between expert knowledge and client comprehension. Now, I find this especially true if you can explain your concept or your reason in a way that relates to the client's own business. For example, if you're talking about you need to rein in your over-servicing that you've been doing for this particular client, then try and make that comparison to the service or the product that they provide their clients and explain why they wouldn't over-service for their clients, just in the same way as you can't either. When it comes to using stories and analogies in your agency, either with your team to make a point or with your clients, first and foremost, it's crucial to tailor your analogies to your specific audience or your client. The more relatable and familiar the comparison, the more impactful the analogy will be. For example, if you're working with a client in the automotive industry, drawing analogies from that world, e.g. marketing is like a fine-tuned high-performance engine, can be particularly effective. When developing an analogy, focus on the core similarities between the two things that you're comparing. Identify the key aspects or characteristics that align and use those as the foundation for your analogy. At the same time, be mindful of potential areas of disconnect or confusion. You want your analogy to clarify a point that you're trying to make and not confuse people. Now, if fundamentally you're a feeling type of communicator like me, then analogies and storytelling will become second nature. But if not, it's worth considering how they can support you to communicate more effectively. If you feel like your point is just being missed or you're talking to a brick wall, then consider how using an analogy or a story might help drive that point home. Listening to this podcast episode on the power of storytelling and analogies is like being handed a valuable toolbox. Just as a skilled carpenter needs the right tools to craft beautiful and functional pieces, as a marketer or an agency owner, you need the tools of storytelling and analogies in your communication arsenal. Each of the stories we explored today and each of the analogies that I unpacked is like a specialized tool in that toolbox. By adding these tools to your repertoire and mastering their use, you'll be able to communicate more effectively, simplifying complex concepts or points that are just being missed, and forging deeper connections with your team and with your clients. You'll have the power to craft messages that really resonate, leaving lasting impact and change after the initial conversation. But like any tool, storytelling and analogies requires practice and skills to wield them effectively. So don't just let this toolbox collect dust. Put these techniques to work in your client and your team interactions, hone your craft, and watch as your communication becomes sharper, more engaging, and ultimately more successful. So a bit of a different episode, looking at things in a different way. And what prompted me to record this episode this week was just paying attention to how many analogies and storytelling that I use with my group, in my group coaching program, or my one-to-one clients, or even with my team. And I know how powerful it is for getting a point across, and I know that you will know that too if you put into action some of the stuff that we've talked about today. So another action-packed episode. As ever, if you found it useful, please do consider leaving a review, because that helps the algorithm show this podcast to more people, and that means I can help more people. And obviously make sure you've hit the subscribe button so that you are alerted every Thursday when the next episode of the Agency Accelerator podcast is released. But other than that, have a great rest of your week, and I will see you next Thursday.